Who can record?
That we just turned it on. So it's over to you, Michael.
All right, good morning. Jar packages. So as part of our drive for first-class support for Java, we decided to add support for jar packages and their cousins, WAR files, EAR files, none of which I'd never heard of before until recently. So long story short, initially, is you can now add a jar file to the built-in Octopus feed. So that's kind of the good. Now for all the questions. Just let me play this one. Right. So to start with, jars are often named not including the version number, unlike NuGet files. So we are supporting getting the version from a manifest file, which is contained within the jar file. So this is not unlike NuGet files where the manifest contains the version number and the package ID. So in this case, so there are defined headers within a jar file's manifest, and I guess we could go and define our own additional header in here to specify the version number, because these headers were designed with libraries in mind rather than deployment packages. So the whole specification version and implementation version thing doesn't make too much sense. But on initial inspection, it seems like if we're going to use one of these, the implementation version seems like the most likely place to get the version number from. But that's up for grabs, really. That's where it's coming from at the moment. If you don't specify an implementation version in the package, it looks for it in the file name. And if it's not in either of those places, obviously it fails. So now what? You've got a jar file in the built-in Octopus feed. This is where the questions really begin, though. What do you expect to happen? I guess the first obvious thing you'd expect to be able to do is to transfer the package somewhere. So I'm adding a transfer file name to the transfer package step because the file name of the jar file is important in many contexts. So we're going to allow you to control the file name that it goes to on the target rather than getting the default, which is package ID, package version, .jar. We're going to add a bunch of new steps supporting various web servers and deployment technologies, Tomcat, Wildfly. So these go to the blog posts that Matthew Casperson's been writing recently. We're going to take those scripts that he's put together and turn them into first-class step types. So the questions, though, with jar packages are, they're kind of like other packages, but they're not as well. So should you be able to use a jar package in a deploy to IIS step? You can deploy a Java application within IIS. Likewise for a Windows service, should that work? We'll have new package steps. Do they only support jar files? These new Tomcat servers? Again, there's no reason you can't deploy an ASP.NET application to a Tomcat web server. So I guess up until now, our package types, with the exception of Docker, have been interchangeable. This isn't so true with jar files. It'll take extra work to make them work the same as other packages across all steps. You don't want it to behave the same. You don't extract the jar file like you do a zip or a NuGet package. It gets placed somewhere. So I guess, yeah, are we okay with this? I suppose the Docker package feed already broke the mold for not all package types being equal, but it was almost so different that it was okay. It clearly made no sense to deploy a Docker file to IIS, for example, but a jar file, it kind of almost makes sense if you look at it. So I don't know.
Are you do you want to answer to that question now, or do you have more to talk about?
Let's just go through to the end and then start a conversation about it. Actually, that is the end, so that works well. So yeah, I do. I really don't know what the right answer for this is. Is this the right direction? Are we happy for some of these step types to just fail at deployment time and say, look, we currently don't do that with this package type? It's because we don't have a great way at the moment of exposing what works for what package types.
I think it's logical, right? That there's going to be flows that make sense for the certain package types, especially if we continue down the path of having strong support for different platforms. It's where it just doesn't make sense, and potentially we protect them up front so that they couldn't add it. But I think if we do go down that approach that, you know, we maintain flow so there's support for X package or X package type with whatever steps, etc., that we make it as simple but also as clear as possible so that there's not confusion where we let them add it, but then it fails later. It's kind of worse than if they try and add one up front and we make it clear and say, this is not possible. This is a X step does not support Y. And I think for the most part, we're going to be right with those assumptions because, yeah, sort of my thinking, but anyone else?
So the challenge with that is, though, it's hard to do this up front because when you go and create a step, the package ID that you're selecting there doesn't really have a type. At the moment, we don't actually stop you from, say you've got Hello World, we don't stop you from having 1.0.0 of Hello World being a zip file, 1.1.0 being a NuGet package, 1.1.2 being a tar file, because they've been interchangeable up until now. So it's a bit of a change for us to start baking the type of the packages into the package ID, which is what we would have to do to expose this up front. And also, obviously, as soon as you start using variables to resolve your package IDs, resolving a type with them is out the window. So it doesn't seem feasible to do it at deployment process design time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so if we do nothing, the worst that can happen is that someone tries to deploy a jar or warp package to IIS. But what are the chances of this happening?
Yeah, that's right. And they'll do it once, right, and try and deploy it and get hopefully an error message saying we don't support this package type.
Fundamentally, though, there's no reason that, like you said, there's no reason you can't deploy a jar file to IIS. It's just there's a different setup process. Like there's a different bunch of steps. So to me, that's almost a concern of calamari. That's not really something that we need to care about up front. I mean, we can do that in calamari when we get the package. Because at that point we know what we've got and we can do what we need to do. And I don't think there's any, in this particular case with these particular packages, I don't think there's anything necessarily stopping us from supporting both. Yeah, and that issue of having all the different package types across deployments, like you say, you might deploy once using a jar and the second time might be a zip. And that sort of cuts to the heart of what I was mentioning earlier, where we need to make sure we got the same consistent versioning strategy as well, because then the same problem occurs. Like we have Maven support and Semver support for versioning. As soon as we have this kind of crossover between the two worlds, which you can do, we need to make sure we're sort of supporting one processor all the way. The nice thing about Docker is, as you mentioned, it's very clear cut where the worlds end. Whereas with this, it's not quite so obvious.
No, I feel like that, and that's really what the question comes down to. You're right. There's nothing we can't make work. It's just work for us to do it. So if we want to support this across different package types, we just have to implement it slightly differently depending on the package type. And then there's the question of discoverability. If I'm coming in as a first-time Java user, I've added my jar file. Suddenly I've got a wall of steps in front of me, but some I can use, some I can't, but it's not immediately clear which of those are which.
I think that's the key, right? And that's the driver for this, is that like we've got the onboarding and stuff, but that was built at the point in time for someone new, and it's primarily .NET. But what is the same experience for someone for Java?
Yes and no. I mean, you're coming to that page with the task in mind. You're not coming to that page and going, I've got a package now. Where can I deploy it? You know, you're not coming to that page and going, I've got a jar package, and thinking, oh, I'm going to, I want to push it through a Docker step because there's a Docker step there. You're typically coming to that knowing from what you're trying to do.
Yeah, but it can be confusing, just the crossover from .NET to Java. So, I guess the only thing is that if it's clear with the steps, like the built-in steps that are like sort of the most robust, that if you want to deploy to Wildfly, that's clear and easy to find versus deploy to IIS. Just so, because I guess the thing is we don't want to lead people to confusion and have questions. So if they come in and it's super clear and easy, as we probably can, then that's not an issue.
Yeah,
yes. So just to highlight this issue, like Rob Perez and I were talking about this yesterday, the deploy a package step, for example, it's if you choose a jar file in a deploy a package step, what should happen? Currently, that step extracts the packages, but nobody really wants their jar file extracted on the other side. So straight away, you've gone wrong, I guess, which isn't a great experience.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, the deploy package step isn't really deploy a package. It's kind of extract a package, which is extract a package plus you can tack on all these different features which do stuff. And I think it's a bit confusing. It could be a bit confusing in that way for a Java person coming along going, yes, I want to deploy my package, selecting deploy a package, when actually what deploy a package does is extract a package. So I think we've got a bit of a branding sort of issue there, which is just a natural result of the history of the product.
So we could do something like start adding metadata to our steps, just little attributes on them, and then give a filter at the top of that page. So jar packages could be a filter, for example. And so it would make it easy for the user to say, show me things that apply to jar packages, or a Java tag or something. And just to quickly filter those steps to this, because we're getting more and more steps all the time, obviously. And now we're starting to get to the case where not all are applicable in all scenarios.
Yeah, you can already do that. I mean, you have name and you have description, and we filter on both. So the question from my perspective is, as a Java user, what is my goal? Is my goal to deploy a package or to deploy to Tomcat? So if I'm looking for Tomcat and I type Tomcat and I find a step, I'm done. But yeah, I don't know how they operate, so I don't know how they approach this problem.
I guess the one thing, it's sort of good and bad, right? Where we've got all these steps, and a lot of them, both like our built-in steps, we're getting more and more, and they're really good. But it's trying to simplify them when people come in for the first time or 10th time, that they find what they need more easily. So whether we need, so we have categories currently, or some categorization, whether that needs to be revisited, just to make that little bit simpler so they don't have to hunt. But I think really it's tied to the goal, like, do we need to revisit it?
Yeah, do we have a problem? I suppose that's what I would ask, because
I think there's a potential one, yeah.
There's potential, but if I look at, I don't know, Azure or AWS, you go and you type what you're looking for. Because at some stage you have just so much stuff that you have to filter. Like, there's just no way to. We can use categories. That's what we do for the library. Yeah, we could have a .NET category, Java category, but then you start trying to figure out, okay, well then this belongs to 2 different categories. So you can solve the problem this way. But if you can type and quickly get what you're looking for, maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess by adding, we need to make it immediately clear, I suppose, that they probably want the transfer package step, not the deploy package step, as the initial thing. All the first class steps like Tomcat, Wildfire, they'll probably make sense. They'll just choose those. But again, I suppose the overall question here is, are we happy to go down this road? Because it's going to mean more work in some cases. So for example, these new steps that we add, a Tomcat server, it seems reasonable to expect that we would want to be able to use other package types other than jar files. If you've got your application in a zip file, should you be able to deploy to Tomcat? I would say probably yes. It just means that we'll have to handle it slightly differently depending on the package type. Yeah, as long as that's a road that we're happy to go down.
I would think yes, but I would imagine there's some limitations. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, is it heretical to say that deploy package should be renamed as extractor package?
Yes.
Because all those features we've got there, quick answer, but all the features you tack onto that, kind of we tend to, and we're trying to go towards having first class support for them. So if you want to deploy an IIS package, really should, if you want a smooth experience, go through the deploy an IIS step. And I mean, this is the thing, that there's this fundamental difference. Well, there's this fundamental concept of what deploy package is doing that's not clear from the name, and that's busting it open.
You've also got to remember all of our customers who have been doing that this whole time, where in their mind, they're deploying their application. And to deploy their application, they bundle it in a zip file or a NuGet package because they need to do that. But so that's what they want to do. They want to deploy their application.
I think,
And it's
yeah.
Java
But
land,
deploy
suddenly
it.
we're saying, oh, we just want to move a zip file around.
Yeah, but we're going to be first class support in Javaland too. So I do think there
But, you know,
is.
the answer there would be to keep the one step and then just, if it's a jar file, don't extract it. Do everything else the same. Yeah.
Which was the
I just feel like it's late to the game to suddenly start renaming the most used step in Octopus.
Yeah, it's the ultimate cheese move, right?
Yeah. I'm going to go deploy my, they've removed the one thing Octopus.
I'm going to email.
So you find IIS, find an IIS step.
One thing to throw into the mix is when we eventually get around to the DSE stuff, there'll be potentially different step types there. They'll still be NuGet packages, but they'll be specifically formatted NuGet packages. So I had a vague intention that they would be a different package type, but they don't have to be. But I can see a need for categorizing what a package is at upload time.
I mean,
Yes. So in that case, you would say DSC.
like,
Yeah.
you know, at the moment, you know, if you build a package in the wrong step, we'll do a runtime fail, and it'll fail the very first time they try and, to do it. And then, it's obviously nicer if we can do that up at setup time, but, if it's going to be a massive overhead, it might not actually be that big a problem. And as far as discoverability, I think just having search is great, and you could potentially also add like tags to steps that are included in that search. So, if you could then tag a bunch of things with like Java or jar or war or all those things, not necessarily included in the description, but if someone does go and search for Java, they'll get appropriate steps listed there, even if the name or description doesn't explicitly call. We'll have deployed a Tomcat, and if you search for Java, that would show up because we would have tagged that step, just with some common search terms that get included in that filter.
Yeah. Potentially we could even have pre-canned ones. For the common ones, you click so you've got a little search box and a few different ones that you can just click.
Yep.
It fills it into our existing search, filters, boom. So a few things like that could get us over that hurdle and make it that much easier for these different platforms. So things like that, because it's sort of showing as much as possible. We've got it, it's all there, but then people can refine it quickly and easily, which lets them get to the steps, reduce confusion, and gets on their way.
Can we show someone from outside of Octopus who is a Java user and
Potentially a friend of Octopus or a friend
see
of
what they
Matt's.
say?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Once we've got something sort of end-to-end usable, maybe with at least one of the first class steps built in, then it's probably time to start getting some feedback on it.
I do agree with, I was just going to say, I do agree with Rob Ayres. Just, there is that bit of confusion there of the main, deploy a package thing has connotations in Octopus that new Java users may not expect. But I don't think we can rename that at this point. Yeah, you might be able to put a note at the top saying something, but
Do not use with Java.
Yeah, especially.
I think more and more as we.
Sorry, you go, Rob.
So I was just going to say, I think more and more as we add these first-class support for steps anyway, I think that will become less of a problem, because if I want to deploy something to Tomcat and I can see a Tomcat step there, I'm going to select that rather than going to deploy a package and select the feature. So the more first-class support we have for these sort of things, I think the less of an issue it becomes.
That's right. It's just at the moment, a lot of our documentation points you straight to the deploy a package step, and yeah, that's right. Okay, I feel like no one's really objecting to continuing down this road. It's just there's two problems we kind of have to solve. One's the UI side, making this a little more discoverable, and the other is, I guess, the engineering side. We have to try and minimize the amount of, I guess, explosion of pathways through the code that this creates for us. So hopefully we can push a lot of the logic into the various package types so that they handle themselves, rather than every step having to know how to implement itself differently for different packages. That'll be the key as well, I guess.
Yeah,
all right.
I think it sounds like you're on the right path. Good stuff.
That's all I have.
Okay, awesome.
Well,
Stop
thank you.
recording.
Yeah.
Good.